Jimmy Anderson had everything. He was the captain of Westbrook High's football team in Northern California, class president, honor roll student, and somehow the kind of guy every teacher trusted and every student admired. People called him the Golden Boy because he never seemed to make mistakes. I was probably the only person in school who knew that wasn't true. And the day I accidentally discovered what Jimmy was hiding, my entire life changed. If someone had asked students to describe me, most of them would have paused before remembering my name. My name is Anderson Hayes. I wasn't popular. I wasn't an athlete. I wasn't the guy people crowded around during lunch. I was just the quiet scholarship student who preferred sketching in the art building instead of sitting with the loud groups in the cafeteria. Being invisible wasn't exciting, but it was safe. After getting bullied at my old middle school, I'd learned that staying unnoticed was easier than giving people reasons to talk about me. Still, every morning, my eyes searched for Jimmy before I even realized I was looking. He'd step out of his silver pickup truck with his football duffel bag over one shoulder, flashing that effortless smile that made half the school stare. Girls whispered. Guys slapped him on the back. Teachers greeted him by name. Meanwhile, I quietly walked past with my backpack and headphones, pretending I didn't care. Of course I cared. I'd had a crush on Jimmy since sophomore year. He didn't even know I existed, or so I thought. Everything changed on a rainy Tuesday morning. Mrs. Collins, our English teacher, walked into class carrying a stack of folders. Final semester project, she announced. You'll be working in pairs. The entire classroom buzzed with excitement. I silently prayed for literally anyone except Jimmy. Mrs. Collins began reading the names. Then she smiled. Jimmy Anderson and Anderson Hayes. The room went completely silent. Several students actually laughed. One boy muttered, "No way." Jimmy looked as surprised as I felt. I slowly raised my hand. There has to be a mistake. Mrs. Collins shook her head. No mistake. Sometimes the best ideas come from unexpected partnerships. Great. Just great. After class, I shoved my notebook into my backpack and tried to leave before Jimmy could say anything. Hey! His voice stopped me. I turned around. Up close, he looked even more unfairly perfect than usual. You want to meet after school? He asked casually. Library. I blinked. You actually want to work on the project? He smiled. I'd rather get an A than spend all semester arguing. That smile caught me completely off guard. It wasn't the confident smile he gave the whole school. Felt genuine. Sure, I answered quietly. Cool. 4 o'clock. I nodded before walking away, trying to ignore how fast my heart was beating. The school library was almost empty by the time I arrived. Jimmy was already there. He had 2 coffees sitting on the table. I wasn't sure what you liked, he admitted. So I guessed. I looked down. It was exactly what I usually ordered from the coffee shop across the street. You guessed right. His grin widened. Good. For the next 2 hours, we worked on our presentation. Well, mostly. We kept getting distracted. He joked about how terrible he was at poetry. I laughed when he accidentally knocked his notebook onto the floor. You laugh more than I expected, he said. I thought quiet people weren't supposed to laugh. I thought football captains weren't supposed to be funny. He laughed. So you've been judging me? I've been observing. That's somehow worse. For the first time in years, talking to someone felt easy. No pretending. No overthinking. Just easy. When we packed up to leave, our hands reached for the same notebook. Our fingers brushed. Only for a second. But neither of us moved immediately. Jimmy looked into my eyes. Something unreadable flashed across his face. Then he quietly pulled his hand back. Sorry. It's okay. The walk to the parking lot was strangely silent. Not awkward. Just different. As we reached the football field, Jimmy suddenly stopped walking. You mind if we take a shortcut? I shrugged. Sure. Instead of heading toward the student parking lot, he walked behind the stadium where almost nobody ever went after practice. Then he froze. I'll be right back. Before I could ask why, he disappeared behind the equipment building. A minute passed. Then another. Curious, I walked around the corner. That's when I saw him. Jimmy was sitting alone on the concrete steps with his head lowered into his hands. His shoulders were shaking. He was crying. Not the kind of tears someone could fake. The kind that came from carrying something too heavy for too long. I instinctively stepped backward. A loose pebble rolled beneath my shoe. Jimmy looked up immediately. His eyes widened. In one quick motion, he wiped his face and stood. You weren't supposed to see that.
I'm sorry.
He forced a weak smile. Forget it happened. I can. He looked at me for several long seconds. No, he whispered. I don't think you can. Before I could answer, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen. The smile disappeared instantly. He answered without saying hello. Yeah. Even from several feet away, I could hear an angry man's voice shouting through the speaker. Jimmy closed his eyes.
No.
I'm not doing that. More yelling. I'm living my own life, Dad. Another burst of shouting echoed through the phone. Jimmy clenched his jaw. I'm done pretending. He ended the call without another word. For several moments, neither of us spoke. The perfect golden boy everyone admired wasn't perfect at all. He looked exhausted, lonely, like he'd been carrying a secret no one else had noticed. Finally, he looked at me like someone he could actually trust. I had no idea that trust was about to change both of our lives. The next morning, as I opened my locker before first period, a folded white note slipped onto the floor. There was no name.
No anduriting irracognisa.
Just one chilling sentence written in black marker. Stay away from Jimmy, or everyone will find out what you're hiding. Anderson stared at the note until the hallway around him became a blur. His hands trembled. He read the sentence again. Stay away from Jimmy, or everyone will find out what you're hiding. A cold knot formed in his stomach. The problem was, he didn't even know what secret the note was talking about. Was it his crush on Jimmy? Had someone seen the way he looked at him? Or was it simply another cruel prank? Before he could think any further, Jimmy walked down the hallway, smiling as usual. There you are, Jimmy called. Ready for history? For a split second, Anderson wanted to smile back. Instead, he stuffed the note into his pocket and forced himself to look away. I'm kind of busy. Jimmy frowned. Oh, okay. That confused expression stayed with Anderson the entire morning. Over the next few days, Anderson did everything he could to avoid Jimmy. He left class before the bell. He ate lunch in the art room. He ignored Jimmy's texts about their English project. Every time Jimmy tried to talk to him, Anderson found another excuse to walk away. Jimmy wasn't the type to give up easily. After chemistry class, he caught up with Anderson outside. Did I do something wrong?
No.
Then why are you acting like I'm invisible? I'm not. You haven't looked at me in 3 days. Anderson forced a shrug. I've just been busy. Jimmy studied him carefully. You've never been a good liar. For a moment, Anderson almost told him everything. The note, the fear, the strange feeling that someone was watching them. Instead, he shook his head. We should probably keep things professional. Jimmy's smile disappeared. If that's what you want. He walked away before Anderson could change his mind. Watching him leave hurt far more than Anderson expected. Friday morning brought another surprise. Principal Matthews stood in the auditorium during the weekly announcements. Next Saturday is Westbrook High's annual Fall Charity Gala. The students cheered. It wasn't an ordinary dance. It was the biggest school event of the year. Parents attended. Local businesses sponsored it. Scholarships were announced. Even the local newspaper covered it. Then Mrs. Collins stepped onto the stage. Since the gala celebrates teamwork, every senior project team is expected to attend together. Groans echoed through the auditorium. Anderson sighed. Of course, there was no escaping Jimmy now. That afternoon, Jimmy found him in the library. I guess we're stuck together. I guess. Jimmy hesitated. So, you still don't want to tell me what's wrong? Anderson looked down at his notebook. It's nothing. Jimmy let out a quiet laugh. You know, you're terrible at pretending everything's fine. And you're an expert? The words slipped out before Anderson could stop them. Jimmy's smile faded.
No.
He looked away. I'm really not. For just a second, both of them understood that they were hiding things neither was ready to say out loud. The following Monday, Westbrook High exploded with gossip. Everyone expected Jimmy to ask Madison Reynolds, captain of the cheer squad, to the charity gala. She certainly expected it. She spent the entire lunch period sitting beside Jimmy, laughing at every joke he made. Anderson tried not to watch. He failed. He hated himself for caring. As he packed his tray to leave, Jimmy suddenly stood. "Hey, Anderson." The cafeteria went strangely quiet. Jimmy walked straight toward him. "I was wondering." He rubbed the back of his neck, looking unexpectedly nervous. "Would you go to the gala with me?" Silence. Complete silence. A fork hit the cafeteria floor somewhere behind them. Madison stared in disbelief. Dozens of students stopped eating. Someone whispered, "Did he just ask Anderson?" Anderson blinked. "You mean?" "As project partners," Jimmy said quickly. "But I'd rather go with someone I actually enjoy spending time with." His cheeks turned slightly pink after saying it. Anderson's heart raced. Sure." Jimmy smiled. A real smile. Not the practiced one he gave photographers after football games. This one reached his eyes. "Awesome." As Jimmy walked away, whispers erupted across the cafeteria. "What was that? Since when are they friends?" Jimmy could have gone with anyone. Madison left without finishing her lunch. Her expression said everything. Over the next week, they spent nearly every afternoon together. They researched their presentation, grabbed burgers after school, argued over which superhero movie deserved the highest rating. Jimmy insisted pineapple belonged on pizza. Anderson called him insane. Jimmy laughed so hard soda nearly came out of his nose. For the first time in years, Anderson forgot what it felt like to be afraid. One evening they stayed late at a small coffee shop near the beach. Outside, the California sunset painted the sky orange and pink. Jimmy looked unusually quiet. "What?" Anderson asked. Jimmy smiled softly. "You know." "What?" "I don't think anyone's ever listened to me the way you do." Anderson's heartbeat quickened. "You make it easy." Jimmy held his gaze for several long seconds. "I've been wanting to tell you something." Anderson barely breathed. Just then, Jimmy's phone buzzed. Coach Harrison. Jimmy sighed. "Sorry." He answered immediately. The moment disappeared. The next morning, Westbrook High woke up to chaos. An anonymous Instagram account called Westbrook Secrets had posted several photos. Jimmy and Anderson laughing outside the coffee shop, walking together after football practice, studying in the library. One picture even showed Jimmy gently brushing a leaf out of Anderson's hair. The caption read, "Looks like Westbrook's golden boy has a favorite. Red heart." Within an hour, everyone had seen it. Students whispered as they walked by. Phones lit up in every classroom. Comments multiplied by the minute. Some were supportive. Others weren't. Football practice ended early that afternoon. As Anderson walked past the field, he overheard Jimmy talking with two teammates. "Dude," one player said, "people think you're into Anderson." Another laughed. "Tell everyone they're crazy." Jimmy stayed silent. The silence stretched for several uncomfortable seconds. Finally, he simply picked up his helmet. "I don't owe anyone an explanation." The teammates exchanged confused looks. But Anderson didn't stay long enough to hear anything else. His chest tightened. Jimmy hadn't denied it, but he hadn't admitted anything either. To Anderson, the silence felt like uncertainty. Maybe Jimmy was embarrassed. Maybe he regretted spending time with him. Maybe the rumors had already ruined everything. That night, Anderson ignored every message Jimmy sent, including the last one. "Can we please talk? I think you've misunderstood everything." The campus felt different the next morning. Not because anything had physically changed, because everyone was looking at them. Anderson noticed it the moment he stepped onto the brick walkway leading toward the student union. Conversations stopped. Phones lifted. Whispers followed him from one building to the next. Normally, he would have lowered his head and kept walking. Today, he forced himself to keep moving. He wasn't going to let strangers decide how his day would go. As he reached the Fine Arts building, someone grabbed his wrist. "Andy." He turned. Jimmy looked exhausted. Dark circles sat beneath his blue eyes like he hadn't slept at all. "I've been trying to call you." "I know. You never answered." "I didn't know what to say." Jimmy looked around before lowering his voice. "Can we talk somewhere private?" Anderson hesitated. Part of him wanted to walk away. Another part had wanted this conversation for days. Finally, he nodded. 5 minutes. Instead of heading toward the library, Jimmy led him to the old botanical garden tucked behind the science department. It was quiet there. The only sounds came from birds and the fountain in the center of the courtyard. Jimmy took a deep breath. I never asked for those pictures to end up online. I know. But you think I'm embarrassed. Anderson stayed silent. Jimmy laughed bitterly. You always get quiet when you're hurt. That caught Anderson off guard. You noticed. I notice everything about you. The words landed between them. Neither of them moved. Jimmy rubbed the back of his neck. When my teammates asked about us, you didn't answer. I couldn't. Why? Jimmy looked away toward the fountain. Because if I lied, he swallowed, I'd be lying to myself too. Anderson's heartbeat quickened. Before he could respond, footsteps echoed behind them. Coach Miller. There you are. Jimmy straightened immediately. The athletic department needs you. Coach Miller glanced toward Anderson. You too. Inside the athletic office sat 3 people. Coach Miller, the athletic director, and Jimmy's father. The atmosphere turned cold the instant Anderson walked in. Jimmy's father stood. So this is him. Jimmy stepped forward. Dad, I've been hearing plenty about your new friend. His tone made the word sound like an accusation. Anderson immediately understood where Jimmy's anxiety came from. Jimmy's father wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. Every word carried pressure. You came here to earn a degree, he continued, not to become campus gossip. Jimmy clenched his jaw. My personal life isn't your business. It becomes my business when it affects your future. Coach Miller awkwardly cleared his throat. Maybe this isn't the place. It is exactly the place, Jimmy's father interrupted. He looked directly at Anderson. I hope you understand that Jimmy has responsibilities. Before Anderson could answer, Jimmy stepped between them. No. His voice was calm. If you have something to say it to me. For several tense seconds, nobody spoke. Finally, Jimmy's father grabbed his coat. We'll finish this conversation later. He walked out without another word. The office remained silent. Coach Miller sighed. Jimmy, are you okay? Jimmy nodded. I'm fine. But Anderson knew he wasn't. That evening, Jimmy skipped football practice for the first time all semester. Instead, he knocked on Anderson's dorm room door. I brought pizza. Anderson opened the door. Pineapple again? Jimmy smiled. I'm trying to improve your taste. You've got a long way to go. For the first time in days, they laughed. They spent hours talking. Not about rumors. Not about football. Just life. Favorite childhood movies. Music. Dream vacations. The conversation felt effortless. Eventually the room grew quiet. Jimmy stared out the window. You know what scares me most? What? Not losing football. He looked at Anderson. Losing the people who actually make me happy. Anderson's heart pounded. Jimmy slowly reached across the couch. Their fingers touched. Neither pulled away. Instead, Jimmy gently intertwined his fingers with Anderson's. I've wanted to do that for weeks. Anderson smiled. So have I. A sudden knock shattered the moment. Jimmy quickly stood. His roommate, Mason, stepped inside. Oh! His eyes moved between their joined hands. Neither of them spoke. Mason slowly nodded. I knew it. Jimmy frowned. Knew what? Mason sighed. The anonymous campus account. Both of them froze. What about it? Anderson asked. I know who's running it. The room fell completely silent. Mason looked guilty. It's Tyler. Jimmy stared at him. My best friend. Mason nodded. He thinks you're throwing away your future. He told me people like you only create distractions. Anderson felt his stomach drop. All those messages, the photos, the rumors. Someone had been planning everything. Jimmy found Tyler outside the recreation center that night. You've been following us? Tyler didn't deny it. I was protecting you. By spying on me? You were forgetting who you are. Jimmy took another step forward. No. I was finally becoming who I am. Tyler shook his head. You'll lose everything. Jimmy answered without hesitation. Then maybe everything I've been protecting wasn't worth keeping. Tyler looked stunned. For the first time since they'd met, Jimmy wasn't trying to please anyone else. He was choosing for himself. Later that night, Anderson received a text from Jimmy. "Meet me at the campus lake. I need to show you something." When Anderson arrived, the dock was empty. Only one folded envelope rested on the wooden bench. His name was written across the front. Inside was a handwritten letter. The first line made his breath catch. "I've been falling for you since the first week of college. Long before you ever noticed me." As Anderson looked up from the letter, he heard footsteps approaching behind him. Anderson slowly turned around. Jimmy stood at the end of the dock, his hands tucked into the pockets of his varsity jacket. The evening sky glowed with shades of orange and purple as the sun disappeared behind the hills surrounding the campus. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the gentle ripple of the lake. "You read it," Jimmy said quietly. Anderson nodded. "I didn't know you felt that way. I was afraid to tell you." Jimmy let out a small, nervous laugh. "Funny, isn't it? Thousands of people have watched me play football without making me nervous." He looked into Anderson's eyes. "But standing here with you,
I'm terrified.
Anderson folded the letter carefully. "You don't look terrified. I'm really good at pretending." That made Anderson smile.
No.
"What? You're finally getting bad at pretending." Jimmy laughed. "Maybe that's because I don't want to anymore." He stepped closer. "I've spent most of my life trying to become the person everyone expected. The perfect athlete. The perfect son. The perfect student. But somewhere along the way," he shook his head, "I forgot to become myself." Anderson reached out and gently took Jimmy's hand. "You don't have to earn being yourself." Jimmy looked down at their hands before meeting Anderson's eyes again. "You always know what to say. I usually don't. You do with me." For the first time in weeks, the weight between them felt lighter. Jimmy leaned in slowly, giving Anderson every chance to step away. Instead, Anderson closed the remaining distance. Their lips met in a gentle, lingering kiss. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't dramatic. It simply felt like two people finally allowing themselves to stop hiding. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "I've wanted to do that for a long time," Jimmy admitted. "So have I." The next morning, the campus buzzed with excitement. It was the day of the Pacific Coast Collegiate Classic, the biggest football game of the season. Students filled the stadium hours before kickoff. Blue and silver school colors covered nearly every seat. Anderson found a place near the 50-yard line beside his roommate, Mason. "You nervous?" Mason asked. "A little. You should be." Mason grinned. Jimmy looked like a completely different person this morning. "What do you mean?" He looked happy. The game was intense from the opening whistle. Their rivals scored first, then again. By halftime, Jimmy's team trailed by 2 touchdowns. The crowd grew quiet. Sports commentators in the press box began talking about how the Golden Boy might finally lose the biggest game of his college career. During the break, Coach Miller gathered the players. No one outside the locker room knew what he said. But when the team returned to the field, everything changed. Jimmy wasn't playing to protect his reputation anymore. He was simply playing because he loved the game. He encouraged teammates after mistakes, celebrated every successful play, trusted everyone around him instead of trying to do everything himself. His confidence spread across the entire team. With less than a minute remaining, the score was tied. The stadium held its breath. Jimmy launched one final pass toward the end zone. Touchdown. The crowd erupted. Blue confetti exploded into the air as thousands of students jumped to their feet. The team rushed onto the field, lifting Jimmy onto their shoulders. Instead of celebrating for long, he climbed down and searched the stands. His eyes found Anderson almost immediately. He smiled. Not for the cameras. Not for the reporters. Just for him. The following week, the university hosted its annual Leadership Awards ceremony. Faculty members, alumni, and students filled the auditorium. Jimmy had been selected to give the closing speech. Backstage, he adjusted his tie. "You still have time to change your speech," Coach Miller said. Jimmy smiled. "I finally wrote the one I wanted." Coach nodded proudly. "Then go make it count." Jimmy walked onto the stage as the audience applauded. He thanked his coaches, his professors, his teammates, then he paused. "When I arrived on this campus," he began, I believed success meant never disappointing anyone. The room became quiet. I thought being admired was the same thing as being happy. He shook his head gently. I was wrong. He glanced toward Anderson, who sat in the third row. The people who truly care about you don't ask you to hide who you are. They encourage you to become more honest, more compassionate, and more courageous. I've learned that perfection isn't what inspires people. Authenticity does. The audience listened in complete silence. I've also learned that the bravest decisions are rarely the loudest ones. Sometimes courage is simply choosing kindness. Sometimes it's trusting someone enough to let them see the real you. And sometimes, he smiled warmly at Anderson, it's admitting that meeting one person can completely change the direction of your life. The auditorium erupted into applause. Several students stood. Then more. Within seconds, nearly the entire room was on its feet. Coach Miller wiped away a tear. Mason clapped so hard his hands turned red. Even a few of Jimmy's teammates, who had once questioned him, were smiling proudly. After the ceremony, students gathered outside the auditorium beneath strings of lights that stretched across the campus courtyard. Music drifted through the evening air. Someone started dancing. Others laughed while taking graduation photos. Jimmy walked over to Anderson. So, I think we survived. Anderson laughed. I think you're right. Jimmy reached for his hand without hesitation this time. No looking around. No worrying about who might be watching. Just confidence. I'm done hiding. Me too. They shared another warm kiss as cheers and playful applause came from nearby friends. When they pulled apart, Mason called out, "About time!" Everyone laughed. Even Jimmy. 6 months later, campus life felt wonderfully ordinary. Jimmy was still one of the university's best athletes. Anderson's artwork had been selected for a regional student exhibition. Their schedules were busy, but they always found time for late-night walks around the lake, terrible pineapple pizza debates, and coffee between classes. One afternoon, they returned to the same dock where everything had changed. Jimmy slipped the old handwritten letter from his backpack. "You kept it?" Anderson asked. Jimmy nodded. "It reminds me of the day I stopped trying to be perfect and started being happy." He folded the letter again and smiled. "You know something?" "What?" "I used to think everyone loved the golden boy." He looked at Anderson with the same genuine smile that had first appeared in the library months earlier. "But the only person whose opinion truly mattered was the one who saw me before I even knew who I was." Anderson squeezed his hand. Together, they watched the sunset paint the lake with shades of gold, knowing that the future ahead of them wouldn't always be easy, but it would be honest, and they would face it side by side. If this story made you smile, touched your heart, or reminded you that love is worth fighting for, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more emotional gay romance stories every week. Tell me in the comments, when did you realize Jimmy had fallen for Anderson? Red heart. And if this video reaches 5,000 likes, I'll release a sequel showing their college life, new challenges, and the next chapter of their love story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.